Awesome. Welcome to yet another episode of uDubsRadio podcast. Once again, my name is Azania. I am with the DVC for Student Affairs, Prof. Matete. Before I go any further and before I can ask her the questions, I think upon doing my research, I stumbled upon the most interesting part about Prof. And this is, she was a radio presenter in the 1990 up until 2000. She presented an educational program on reading, study skill, and examination readiness for Radio Thobela in the northern Sesotho. And those who are familiar with Thobela FM, it's mostly in the northern part of the country, and that is Limpopo. And beyond that, she's been involved very much within the student affairs. She's worked with the University of Pretoria from 2012 up until she joined us, a Deputy Director, E-Learning and Educational Consultancy, Department for Innovation and Education at University of Pretoria as well. She subsequently became the Acting Director on the Department of Student Affairs in the same university, which is UP. The list goes on, but for me, Prof, welcome and thank you so much for honoring our invite.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
We really do appreciate
I'm delighted to be here.
Awesome stuff. We do not want to waste your time. This is just a relaxed session, Prof. This is not any interrogative session, just to ease you. But of course, considering that we're in 30 years of democracy, we just wanted to have an engagement, just to reflect on the higher education landscape, you know. But of course, we can't do this without fully looking at what has been happening within the wider landscape, which of course, Prof, it brings again the role of the student affairs. How has it evolved within the universities over this 30-year period?
Yes, there has been some evolving
yes,
of the student affairs portfolio or engagement in higher education, to such an extent that at some stage people reduced student affairs to what they saw as student politics. And we need to be so conscious that in a country like ours, when people talk about politics, to them, to most people, it becomes synonymous as dirty politics. And that becomes highly problematic. Others, when they talk politics, they're talking party politics. So there was a time when student affairs was just associated with, you know, SRCs who come from party politics and who are bringing party politics into the university, but even worse, who are engaged in dirty politics. There was an era where student affairs was seen as that, and because of that it was relegated to the periphery of the academia. Part of the change that has happened to date as I speak is to understand that student affairs is really about student success.
definitely.
Students come to university to grow, to develop, and to be successful. So if that is at the heart of the mission and vision of every student who comes in student affairs, that is what should keep us busy.
Certainly.
What do we do, amongst others, to remove barriers on the way to success? What do we do to enhance the success that students would like to be part of their profiles as they move through universities?
No, certainly that was really a mouthful one, Prof, because I think it also certainly does answer my follow-up question, which was going to be the key function insofar as the student affairs is concerned. But I think you are answering it insofar as when you're saying that the office is not primarily just an office that speaks to SRC, but it is an office that focuses on the development and the livelihood of students. It definitely does capture, for me, the latter questions. But of course, for me, another question that came to mind, you know, Prof, because in most instances, as you have highlighted, that the office is mostly juxtaposed with student politics and so on and so forth. But for me, what I really want to grasp, right, is what initiatives, you know, have been developed to make it a point that this development of students that you are speaking of, you know, is at the center of the office. Just roughly, what have been the initiatives just to promote student development?
Oh, yes, because in student affairs and in student development, we talk about holistic development,
yes,
holistic growth. There are many other initiatives, and I'm going to talk about initiatives across the sector, not
Certainly,
just at
yes.
UWC. One of the things that we understand very well is that higher education is expensive.
Certainly.
So the cost of higher education can be such a barrier. So student affairs, one of the things that we do, we have to initiate relationships and talk to foundations and organizations that can help us, deal with this challenge. But amongst one of the exciting initiatives that I've seen across universities, and of course others do it better than others,
Certainly.
is where SRCs are driving a fundraising mission to make sure that they deal with historical debt, given how fees must fall, as a movement, as an era, has helped us to understand the depth of issues around finances and education. So a number of SRCs in many other institutions are driving a fundraising fund to be able to deal with historical debt amongst others, and to cover what we commonly call the missing middle.
Lovely stuff. And I like that you mentioned that point, Prof, because again, when I went to dig around, and this is of course in celebration of your mother as well, in her memory, I did see that you actually started a foundation in her memory to honor her. And I do understand that there are some beneficiaries as well that have benefited in that initiative, which for me again really touches base on what you're saying, because in actual fact we do need leadership that does things and put them into practice, so that it just they're not just ideas, but there is a footprint insofar as this is concerned. And with that being said, that is a beautiful initiative, Prof, and thank you so much in actual fact for that, and recognizing that there's actually a need for South African students to go to university, or for the South African youth for that matter, to be educated. But in hindsight, again, just to intertwine this question with some of the sentiments that you have shared, Prof, and I understand that SRCs are part of the Act of 1997, Higher Education Act. And of course, again, this is not mainly an UWC, but just to reflect on the political landscape again. But for me are SRCs still relevant insofar as universities are concerned? And I ask this, Prof, because you find within the 26 universities in our country, there are constantly protests, and those protests would mostly include the SRC in the midst of them, right? And of course, there would be masses which are students from different formations and so on, but SRCs would be leading, in some instances, may not be leading. But for me, are they still relevant within the current political landscape post-democratic dispensation?
SRCs today are more relevant than they were in the past 30 years, far much more relevant than they have ever been. And the number one reason why they are important is for us to understand their role in higher education governance, representing students. But unfortunately, over the years, this is reduced to just complaints, just, these problems that are here, not even the causes of the problems, but if a student comes with this, then it becomes, something that is blown out into a need for protest. Yet SRCs, as part of their governance role, they should be playing a very proactive role. Into each year, they should understand what queries, what challenges, what problems are there in our institution, and what policies and what guidelines, and how do we frame our actions in such a way that those queries that we already know of are dealt with. Are our policies enabling us, to deal? Are they helping us to set boundaries in terms of how we can coexist as we drive our individual but also our collective successes? So SRCs, as in terms of their role in governance, is to make sure that universities are ready. A while ago in South Africa, we always talked about the preparedness of students. The students that higher education are not prepared. But we were neglecting this big issue that South African universities were not prepared for the students who were coming in. Especially, after the gates, in a metaphorical way, were really opened, and we started to talk access in their numbers, access for people like me, which was very limited, and it had to, people had to work very hard to open up access. And as we were opening up this access, universities were just universities. They were not shaping up to understand who is now coming and how do we become ready. So ESSER is one of their roles as a government structure in any university is to proactively look at the shape of the university in its nuanced forms and make sure that their university is ready and is prepared to be able to receive the cohort, the profile of students that are coming, and to make sure that once they are here, they are, they are enabled, they are supported to be successful.
Lovely stuff, Prof. Thank you so much for that. Prof, now just to come back to more rough issues, the past year, which was in roughly November, a student in the university, let me just give a background to this, right? And I give a background, Prof, not only based within our framework, but equally just also again based on just the landscape, because in hindsight, universities are a microcosm of our larger society. So we are a mirror of what is happening within our outside society in hindsight. It so happens that one of our students was then involved in the most treacherous of crimes that are currently, skyrocketing in the country, and that is gender-based violence, where the student stabbed the partner. And I understand that the university, of course, took all the necessary measures that were supposed to be taken by the university insofar as dealing with the case. But I mean, given these alarming femicides or the femicide rates within our society, what really can the roles of universities insofar as this is concerned, Prof? I say this because universities are spaces that are regarded as spaces where one comes and changes their worldview or their perspective thereof. Meaning, if you come from a society that had taught you that toxic masculinity is the order of the day, when you then come to university, you would come out with a different perspective, because this is a space where you learn. You also equally unlearn. But for me, really, Prof, what is the role of universities, insofar as addressing this issue? And really promoting just gender equality. And by gender equality, because there's also this rhetorical thing that likes being done in South Africa insofar as representation is concerned, where we would just throw in women and so on just because, a woman is needed there, a woman must go in there, or we want to have a queer person, we want to have a gay person so that states can fit, where really the crust of the things as to the capabilities of the person are not considered, and all of those nitty-gritties. But really, just for you to chip in, Prof, what can universities do to really address this issue? Because for someone who's outside, who's looking from outside, it really would not make sense for them that someone who's at university were to commit such acts. And this is equally not to say that people who are at universities are incapable of committing such acts, because they are also a result of our larger society as well. Their socialization as well informs their behavior. Can you chip in on that, Prof?
Yes. You talk in the midst about people at university have to learn, but also unlearn some of the things that they have learned. In my division, which is student development and support at this stage, we are rallying around two levers in our strategic direction. We are talking talent and we are talking culture. And we are saying every student who comes through the doors of the gates of UWC is talent. And we do not want to miss the opportunity of making sure that this talent blossoms. It opens up. But we are aware that culture influences the level at which talent can blossom. So culture is never cast in stone. It is forever evolving. And when it comes to GBV, we don't have to argue. We know that we in our societies, we have those cultures of gender-based violence that are so entrenched. And the question is, what are those efforts that we're going to put in place at our universities and at UWC in particular to make sure that we challenge these cultures, and we don't just challenge, we work towards recreating cultures that are different, that are anti-gender-based violence. And one of the things that we are doing as an initiative is to work with first years. We talk about the first year experience program. And my challenge to colleagues when I joined the university, I said, okay, I've attended conferences across the sector where people talk about the first experience, and they would talk about beautiful and what look like powerful initiatives. But when you check, it's 35 first years you've attended there and 73 there, and you're lucky to find next to 100. And my challenge is, if we are to change culture, we should be mainstreaming this type of programs. And that is why, if you've noticed this year, we've tried to pull first years as a cohort. We are conscious that UWC receives around 5,000 first years in a year. So a first year program that is meant to change culture is not going to succeed if we only deal with the most motivated 35 or 73 or 93. It has to be the whole cohort. And we are trying to really mobilize our efforts across working with first years. I always enjoy it when I hear seniors becoming jealous when they see these activities around first years, and when they start to say, but when I was first year, this did not happen. That tells me we're doing something. But I would like to see that increasing. One of the things that we've done is we've put across a kind of a concept paper on anti-gender-based violence, and we want to challenge first years in particular. You seniors, you'll join. And maybe you can learn a thing or two from first years.
Yes, right.
But we know that we work with first years, but we must also work with student leaders. So part of this concept paper, we heard very clearly that leaders are saying they need sensitivity training. That is one of the things that we got from the protest that we had last year. So we organized sensitivity of first responder training, and this would like to see happening every year. But then for first years, we want to engage them in conversations. We want them to watch movies together as a cohort and talk about these issues. For example, we've done one on race, but that movie had a very enlightening scene where, because of apartheid, this husband was destroyed by the system, forced removals. He ended up giving himself over to substance abuse and started abusing the partner. And they started, it was such a beautiful love story, and this is based on a true story. Such a beautiful love story. Yes, that defied, a number of boundaries that were falsely set at that stage. But you see how the whole environment, the apartheid environment, how it created a monster out of this guy, and how he threw his anger and frustration on the partner. And I was so happy to hear first years picking it up as a theme and say these are the things in our societies, but we want to do far much more. For example, we've bought a number of copies of a book that was launched a year or so ago, and this book is set at Wits. It's fictional, and I don't know what the Wits people are saying, but it's anyhow set at Wits, though it's fiction-based, and it addresses issues of how seniors have normalized the abuse of first years. It becomes a culture of a university that when first years come, they are raped, and they don't even call it rape. It's like they are initiating these first years into the lifestyle of a university. And these are the type of cultures that we want to change and challenge, and then recreate a different culture as first years come, so that as they continue to be seniors, they will be, those leaders will be so conscious about making sure that this is not UW's culture. You don't rape a first year and then claim that you're orientating and initiating them into this life of freedom. And, so those are some of the things that we are doing with the first years.
Oh, Prof, you said the most important thing, and I think this is just a problem across board in all universities, where those that have an experience would abuse those that do not have an experience of the space, more especially when it comes to first years and senior students interaction, And for me, I think really it is important that first years be our main target insofar as educating them within those things. But for me, Prof, what I also want to understand, right, I know we have a sexual violence policy within the university, which has a glossary on its own that defines terms. But for me, what I want to understand, how important is it for our students to understand and know the sexual violence policy?
Okay, when we had an incident last year, and we had to check policy and to see how policy is helping us to navigate, the challenges that we had. One of the things that, for those of us who sat around the table, including the gender equity unit, we realized that we are wanting in terms of the policy space around these areas. So there is policy work that is being worked on.
Lovely.
And what I love about well-crafted policies is that policies, frame your thinking. And they become a point of education.
Definitely.
They provide definitions, for example. And I realized when we had this incident that people were conflating assault with sexual assault and sexual harassment. And if you do not have policies that clearly describe and define what this is, when you have incidents, then you're going to struggle with your perpetrators who will be claiming innocence on very technical issues because the definitions are not well crafted. And this is part of the policy work that we need to refine. But policies, especially on GBV, are critical at this stage, and we know that there are national projects, and now every institution should make sure that they have their institutional policies well crafted, and we have to use them as part of the education.
Definitely. Awesome stuff, Prof. But just before, again, you were saying a mouthful and you are shortening my questions because I had 4 pages of paper, guys, to ask this mother, but she's summing everything up. But I like it because for me, it also shows your commitment to the idea. It also shows how invested you equally are to our development as students. I include myself because I'm the student as well. But also, Prof, just again, on the importance of the policy, how important equally is it for students, to know all of these reporting offices and facilities that have been put into the university? Because in most instances, Prof, you would find that students do not know where to go or how to, in actual fact, in most instances, they would know where to go, but they would not know how to approach those certain spaces and all of those things, In most instances, they would report their issues to the gender equity office, or if not, they'll go to SRCs. But how important is it, that we know that there are these spaces that exist? Because in actual fact, what these things do to most students, and this has been also just how my ethnographic analysis insofar as this is concerned, because we stay in our rooms, and end up exacerbating our mental health issues because of the fear of going out there, the fear of even speaking about this issue, because in hindsight, Prof, South Africa is a very hypersexualized society, and with it being so hypersexualized, majority of people fear going and speaking about these things because there's always going to be a question, were you drunk? Because we know our students are, were you drunk? Were you high? Without considering, therefore, that these things just happen even if you're not drunk, even if you're not high. But really, just chip in again, Prof, how important is it for our students that they understand these things?
Yeah, I mean, even if you talk about being drunk or high, the law is quite clear. If you rape me, or if I report that I was sexually violated and the perpetrator and I was drunk, The law is quite clear. There's no case that, you can't defend the perpetrator. You don't even have to ask about consent or anything. This is a crime. Because the person that you engaged with, if you claim you engaged in sex, was not in their rightful state of mind. So, and these are some of the things that our students need to be aware of. We need to bring them into the conversations that we hold, so that these messages become clearly understood and clearly shared. And that is how we are going to affect and impact the culture. But, there are two sides of a coin. How well we have mechanisms and structures where we can report, where I can report if I'm a victim or a survivor. But it is also about the other side of the coin, is about reporting. I've learned that if a university is not well organized in terms of its resources and structures about reporting, the rate of reporting will be less. And if we are careless as administrators, we'll go around with our stats and say, only 3 cases for 2021, only 5 cases. And that will be the narrative that, no, those things don't happen. But it won't be that they don't happen. It will be the rate at which they're being reported.
Yes.
And I challenged my colleagues in my previous life from these other places where I used to live and work, that if you see the stats that low, don't rejoice. Actually, if you see the stats rising, the reporting rising, you must know that you're doing something very well. It means your students know
they
where
trust
to come.
you.
And the more cases are reported, the more you're able to impact on the culture. Because how these cases are being treated, you're building trust that there are systems. And those alleged perpetrators and those that are found guilty, the messages go across the institution that indeed gender-based violence, sexual harassment, sexual assault cannot be tolerated. And you start to break, those holds that are there. But if you undermine how you organize your structures and then your reporting is very low, you also weaken how you forever going to challenge, the culture and change it. And let me just say, one of the things that I'm asking my colleagues to do is to end up with an infographic. I want it as a picture that if I am a victim, I can have this, on my cell phone, or it must be on my wall somewhere, and I must be given these avenues of reporting. Because we know, let's talk about rape, that when you are a victim and a survivor of rape, you've been affected in a number of ways. Your studies are affected. So there must be help. And somebody must be able to talk to you about how you're going to recover your academic program so that it doesn't suffer. But it's a matter of which one comes first. Okay, your studies are affected. Psychologically, your mental health is sent on a spin in directions that you don't want. So you need help. But then your physical body has been violated. You need health. Attention health-wise in terms of your physical body. There are security issues, immediate and in the long term. Your security, is this perpetrator around, or do you need to move away, or but security becomes a big issue that needs attention. And lastly, the legal issues. Do you open a case? You might not be ready at that stage, but you mustn't throw away the evidence that you have, because you do have evidence. So the best thing is, I might not be ready to open a case, but I must find support to be able to put the evidence on, on record, so that later when I have the courage and I have the trust in the system, I can be able to use that evidence. So all those areas need attention. And when I fall victim to this crime, I really need information to act like an agent, more wiser than an artificial intelligence agent. I need information here to know, where to go. That is why I would like to see a UWC infographic about where do I go to receive attention in all of this. I mustn't wait until I'm excluded. Because I was raped, I couldn't concentrate on my studies. A lot of things happened, and I go into the exam and I'm non-productive. And only when I'm excluded, then I tell everybody, but I was raped. That's too late. I must be able to know, and people around, not just the survivor, people around, students, your peers, your friends, your roommates, should be able to tell you, because of this infographic, we are going to help you to seek help for all of these areas. Because at the end of the day, we have to help you to restore your beingness so that you continue to function as a successful student.
Oh, that's a good one, Prof. Once again, Prof, my question then with that one, it now involves holistically our responsibility as students and student leaders, But for me, what I'm interested in is how can we as a community and what means can be deployed to make it a point that we combat gender-based violence at the university or even outside of the spaces we exist in?
We do have a platform at UWC to change this culture and to break its pillars and to create a new culture. But we know student leaders have influence, and it becomes so painful if student leaders are somehow negligent or ignorant, or they're not just paying attention to their responsibilities. One of the things that I would like to see happening is to have a sub-council, not a council, a sub-council of gender officers. In the residences, they'll have these portfolios, and somewhere they allocate a person to the gender office. In the SRC, we have one person, but we do have faculty councils, we have sports councils, even have student organizations, and they allocate, and they would claim there is a gender office of some sort, or gender officer. So if we pull all those portfolios together and create a sub-council, besides that, all leaders, your SRC and all the executives of the councils should go for first responder training and should go for consent training, because we are trying now to formalize these trainings, but to make them meaningful and value-adding, and to make sure that we even use technology to make sure that the content is alive and it is able to reach the depths that we want to. So if we have a sub-council, this sub-council must be a driver of this type of education. They must we'll train them as train the trainer, but beyond training, we want them to run. For example, the concept paper that we have, we want them to take that concept paper, tear it into pieces, and reconstruct a program every year of what they are going to be doing for the university. And then others, when they follow next year, it's a matter of building on them. And we'd like to see leaders who are dedicated towards helping to break the culture of gender-based violence at UWC. And we know if we do it very well, these messages through uDubsRadio and many other media, people will hear about what we are doing. You as graduates, when you go, you would have carried enough experience, intelligence, insights to be able to go out there as citizens and continue to break these pillars of gender-based violence. There is a lot of work, but we are banking on the leaders, and that is why I look forward to the sub-council. The sooner we establish it, the better. And if I have to share with you, we tried to look for, activists and those who are self-proclaimed activists to try to talk to them. And I realized that, that doesn't take us very far, because you as activists, you also defy and you fight. But students who've raised up their hands to be in leadership positions, I respect them a lot, because I recognize the commitment that they have. And I'm convinced if we pull these gender officers across all our structures, we'll have a very powerful group of people who can together put their heads together, use the concept paper as a springboard, and come up with the most creative and innovative ways of helping us to break the culture and to build a new culture.
Lovely stuff, Prof. Just for future, because we started off with reflecting, and in actual fact to just speak of the context and what is happening. But for me right now, before we close off, what are you most looking forward to insofar as the future is concerned, the life of students, and especially as the one who's at the top of that?
I'm looking forward to our higher education sector growing from strength to strength and helping to pull this country out of the rut where it is now. But for UWC, I'm also looking for a university that will continue to shine and to show what it is made of, the talent that we have here. I expect this blossoming to be more, more louder, so that it is taken more seriously. For sure, you've heard me in other platforms when I say to students, you need to be ambassadors of what's happening here.
Yes.
But I believe that there is a lot that we need to do to allow UWC to be who UWC is and to make a contribution in this country. If you look at this, okay, we had open day yesterday, and I was so happy just to come. My day's program, robbed me of being here the whole day, but I told myself that I cannot miss the opportunity of going on campus just to have a feel of what an open day at UWC is all about. Because, those eyes that I saw on campus that were twinkling, looking for information, I look forward to receiving them, because this is the talent that UWC is ready to work with, refine, and allow to blossom. But last year we did not have open day. Why? Because the whole of the first semester was so tumultuous. It was just conflict after conflict, and disruption after disruption. And and here I should speak for myself. I come from a less affluent environment. When I got to university, I did not have much in terms of resources. So if you take a week of study away from me and a month, you are weakening the resources that I need to leverage on, because I do not start where others have started. And when there are disruptions, some people go into the luxury of their homes, and they even enjoy studying from home, because the home just speaks of all the comfort that they need. But that doesn't happen to a lot of us. So when you shut the library or you disrupt a class, you are really taking away from me those resources that I need so much. But then why do we end up with this type of conflicts? At times, it is just about confusing ourselves. What is the enemy? Who is the enemy? I mean, NSFAS is frustrating the rest of us. Why do we fight inside our universities and fight against each other when we know it is NSFAS? That is messing us up. And we need to be talking more closely with our students, with our student leaders, and to understand that the frustrations that we have face us as a university. You might think, oh no, this is a student matter. That's just a suspicious way of classifying some of these challenges. And I mean, with NSFAS, for example, we had with colleagues to go and sit at NSFAS offices for more than 5 hours. We phoned, we emailed, we did everything trying to ask for their audience, because we had a challenge beginning of the year, if you remember, about private residences. And we did not get any responses. And they claimed that they were busy with others. So we ended up driving there. We sat in those offices for 5 hours. And by 5:30, they gave us attention, because they saw that we were not going anywhere. And we did this because, in my understanding, the NSFAS issue is not a student issue. No, it's a university issue. And I'm saying to my colleagues, we need to pay attention to what NSFAS is doing, because we know the impact. We know the state has money, at least for this group of students. It's not about the lack of money, at least for this group. It is just about how to administer the money. And this should be a topic in our Senate meetings, should be a topic, in all the serious platforms, to make sure that NSFAS does not continue to frustrate us and to steal resources away from our students, and to steal these limited resources that a lot of our students, and especially that group that are beneficiaries, that are trying to access. And if we don't pay attention in that way, we'll keep on looking at petty conflicts and fighting amongst us, and that won't take us anywhere. UDubs has to rise up, and for this year I am so happy that we started the year without any class disruptions. I am very thankful. But I know that, of course, it took a lot of work and discussions and all of that, and the preparation and many other factors inside and outside. Unfortunately, the payments for tutors tried to put pull a wet blanket over all the efforts. But I hope even that one, we won't allow it to grow into a monster. We have to slay it and move it out of the way, because this is about holistic success. And UWC has already proved itself as a university that it knows how to polish diamonds. We must just do more. It knows how to develop, talent. We are mourning the loss of Justice Yvonne Mohoro. You know that she comes from here. And you know how great she came to be. You know her legacy. When we were locked in Fees Must Fall, at this time when for us administrators it was depressing. No, chaotic is even like it was depressing. You know, we were receiving messages of hang in there, please don't, don't lose hope. It was extremely tough. She was amongst those who came into the sector, and they created a mediation platform for universities between students and management to talk and say, but we can be together in this and let's find solutions. She contributed to this country in ways that we cannot even, start to unravel. And she belongs here, and this is what UWC is capable of, and many, many, many more. So we need to continue to create an environment where talent is polished, so that talent can blossom. And we are referring to every student. And that is why I'm challenging both students and my colleagues that success can be mainstreamed. I'm tired of a situation where we celebrate 3 women there and maybe 3 people with medals or whatever. No, we must mainstream success, because everybody who comes through our gates has talent, has potential. The rest is just to allow the potential to grow. And this year when I sat on stage with the latest graduation, I enjoyed looking at each graduate, especially those that would go cum laude, or magna cum laude, or summa cum laude. You could just see the personalities. Some of them you can see that, oh, this is somebody who's very reserved. Even after that, they still walk like a police across the stage, and others would, show that this is something special. But my argument is, what stops the majority, if not all students at UWC to acquire this extra surname, cum laude? Because in one graduation that I said way back, I think I was graduating, if I remember very well, a certain granny who was part of the audience, when she had cum laude, she said, which is this family with so many kids who are graduating today, but saying that in Northern Soto, because she thought cum laude is a real surname. Cum laude. Yes. So I'm saying, UWC talent, as they come through our gates, let them come and acquire this extra surname, cum laude, magna, summa. It is possible. When she has done it, why can't you do it? And it's a matter of making sure that we support, we enhance. It can be done by human beings, and you are a human being, so why not? But we have a role of creating this enabling environment.
And I know Prof is going to speak, guys, for summa cum laudes and cum laudes, because she has one. You must go check it out. She's a cum laude herself, hence she's motivating everyone to go get their cum laude.
If I could get at least one, Why not?
We can all do it, Prof. But just one last thing, Prof. Recently, students have been signing a petition. I don't know if you saw online as well, but across all universities, where students are requesting that NSFAS must come back to universities, because with NSFAS being decentralized, it has caused them these plights and these issues that they have. It was more better when NSFAS was still controlled by the universities. What's your take on that?
To me, that's the best logic, to have NSFAS come back to universities, and putting systems just to monitor would be the easiest, rather than systems to administer. all these universities. That to me has never been a wise strategy.
Certainly.
But if universities are allowed to do this and they are supported and there are monitoring systems to make sure that there is no abuse. I mean, South Africa is really advanced in terms of, we know what fraud is, even though we still have people who commit it. We do have systems and we have very good policies. To be able to identify fraudsters and to deal with them where there is political will to deal with them. So to me, that's not an issue that, and these incidents were even few. It's not like all universities had fraudsters who were just stealing money. No, it was just incidents here and there. And because of those few incidents, then the whole change disadvantage the whole environment. I mean, one of the pains that I sit with is I don't even see representation of universities in the NSFAS affairs. We are not beneficiaries. It's like we're just victims. Year after year, rules just get changed. And we are told last minute that for this year, rules have changed. You know, they move from N plus whatever to N plus 1 and many others. We are funding this, or we are funding LLB if it's a top up to your first degree or not. You know, we just get those changes on the go. And at some stage, in a university, you don't even know how to advise a student who has NSFAS complications because the rules are just, and they change like willy-nilly without us. And it cannot be that way. That as the people who understand what progression is within a university, how we measure progression, whether, you know, you are progressing well or you, I mean, we have all the rules. And that's why we have registrars. We have our administrators forming you know, committees across the sector so that we even benchmark. And now NSFAS from outside comes and tells us, no, no, we cannot have it that way. It must come back to universities.
Most definitely. Prof, once again, thank you so much for your time. That was really mouthful. And I'd said earlier I had preferred questions that were as long as I am or tall as I am, but you manage, in actual fact, to respond to all of them, you know, in your answers. Equally, it is an honor and a pleasure, Prof, to be given this opportunity to actually interview you for the students, because, as you had said, nothing can be without us, you know, about us. So hence we wanted to have an engagement with you so that also equally students can see what your office does and perhaps what initiatives already you are preparing for students. Because what we have picked up is that majority of our students really, even if they do know offices, but they don't really know as to what that office is designated for. So we really are grateful for this, Prof. We really appreciate you. And we are hoping that the next time you are going to come and present on the radio because you have an experience.
I used to enjoy that.
But with that being said, gentle folks, thank you so much for tuning in. See you next time.
Thank you.